Hey YouTube, Maestro here from Bendu Lightsaber Combat. Today we're going to be talking about a brief history of the forms in our lightsaber combat system, not in canon, although there will be some crossover with canon, but we're talking about what it means to us, the different forms, what they mean to us, how we define them, how we look at them, and how we built this system that makes each of them unique and distinct and standalone, but also incorporates them and sort of binds them together. Okay, so we're going to start off with the first form, Shii Cho. Some people pronounce it Shii Cho. We don't do the double I, we just pronounce it Shii Cho. Shii Cho is made up of two words, Shii, which means three, literally just the number 3, and then Cho, which is cut or strike, attack, basically, a cutting attack. So when we say Shii Cho, what we're literally saying is 3 cuts, the 3-cut form. And that's what Shii Cho is all about, is as an introductory form, as the first form of lightsaber combat. It was taken directly from traditional swordsmanship, and it's all about making the lightsaber, familiarizing the student with the lightsaber as opposed to a sword, and the things the lightsaber can do. One of the things that's important to note about Shii Cho is the 3 cuts that it's talking about here. And those are introduced, those are, of course, Cho, which is a small attack which always ends with the tip of the sword pointed in line with the target. So an example of Cho would be if I was to attack this way. That's a Cho because I made a striking attack, an edged attack, but the tip of the blade is ending pointed at my target so that I can follow it up with the second cut, which is Shiak, which is a pierce or a stabbing cut. So we have Cho, Shiak, and the last one is Sai or Shim. Sai and Shim is an edged cut where the edge is drug along the target, not attached into the target. So an example of Shim would be if I was to, this is my target, here's my weapon, and I made a Shiak attack, a stab, and I missed, I could follow that up with a Shim. A Sai would be a larger strike, more traditional what you think of when you think of kendo or doing things like, test cuts. Thank you. Test cuts in tatami and traditional kenjutsu, kendo, iado, where you're taking the weapon and you're traveling through with the intent of severing, slicing, completely taking them apart. So we have the 3 cuts. So we have Cho, Shiak, and Sai Shim. Another interesting thing about Shii Cho is that it's taken, in our system, we've taken Shii Cho almost completely from kendo, kenjutsu, real-world applications in the Japanese katana-type arts. There's a smattering of some other stuff in there, and it's very, very watered down, very simplified, especially in the introductory levels, but the basics are all there. It's all about using timing and positioning to actually attack the opponent and then to cover yourself and get back into a good position. So Shii Cho is a very positional art. It's all about lining up your shot, taking your shot very quickly, and then reestablishing a good position so that you're ready for the next guy coming in. One of the most important parts of our forms, as opposed to forms in other systems, which are great. I mean, I've seen a lot of good stuff out there from other people on the internet, some really great stuff. But one of the things that sets us apart from them is our forms are not based on the individual actions that you're taking in a form. For instance, the basic overhand cut that we have. This cut where you're in a Jodan or a high guard and you strike, boom, into the mid guard. It's a very basic cut, usually one of the first cuts that anybody learns or instinctually does with swordplay and martial arts, what form is that? I mean, it's a cut. How does that cut fit into Shii Cho? Is it Makashi? Is that Katsurisu? Is it Ataru? Is it Gemso? Is it Naiman, Juyo, Veipat, whatever? It doesn't. It's in all of them. I mean, I could see doing this kind of an action in every single one of the forms. The individual actions, the individual techniques that we use aren't what define the forms, at least as far as our system goes. So what we're going to talk about now is what we call the fundamental formula. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the specifics of the fundamental formula. Okay, the fundamental formula is what defines Shii Cho. It's what makes Shii Cho, rather as opposed to Makashi, Surisu, Naiman, and so on. All of these have their own fundamental formulas, and we'll go over all of them eventually in other videos. But today in Shii Cho, we're going to talk about how we operate with Shii Cho, what makes Shii Cho Shii Cho. It's the fundamental formula. Everything we do in Shii Cho, all the actions that we undertake, follow the same basic formula. It's a formula for success that's very simple, easy to understand, and it really defines our Shii Cho. The first stipulation, the first point, is that we are to establish our advantage through positioning. This goes back to some of the things I was talking about before, how in Shii Cho, it's all about setting up your positioning. The position that you take as opposed to the opponent, moving in such a way as to give you better advantage so that when you strike, you'll be able to actually succeed in what you're doing. So the first point is how we position. So whenever you see someone using Shii Cho in our system, they're going to be lining up their shot. They're going to be moving in such a way that they're gaining an advantage in positioning. And when we say positioning, we're not just talking about the physical positioning where you are in space. We're also talking about fourth dimensionally, where you are in time, timing, when you go, establishing an advantage there. It's not to your advantage to step forward into someone's attack. That breaks the first rule, and therefore it's bad to do. When you decide to go is part of that positioning, establishing your advantage early through superior positioning. The second point is executing your strikes in what we call clean lines. What this means is finding the openings. That's why we're positioning ourselves. We're trying to position ourselves to put you into a position where you have an opening that's primed that you can take advantage of and strike into. It's clean, or it's open, or it's covered. However you want to say it, it means the same thing. You have a way to get in and actually get to the target through their defenses. And you establish this through that superior positioning in the first step. So the first step leads to the second step, and then the third step is how you respond after that. How are you going to finish up? How are you going to follow up? And that is to reestablish your positioning. So when I'm following the fundamental formula of Shii Cho, when I'm doing this, no matter what action I take, whether I'm striking with an underhanded rising attack, whether I'm thrusting, whether I'm making any kind of complex action like beating the blade and lunging, whatever I'm doing, I'm first going to establish my advantage through my positioning, through my timing, through that sort of thing. I'm going to get that advantage early. Then I'm going to execute my attack in whatever clean line that I have. And afterwards, when I strike, I'm not going to stay there where I am. I'm going to reestablish positioning, whatever that means. In the moment, it could be anything. It could be standing still in the moment, depending on the situation. It also could be retreating back or continuing forward, turning, whatever it takes in that situation. So as you can see, this fundamental formula is exceptionally simple. There's nothing overly complicated about it. It's very deep, but it's very simple. There's a lot of interpretation, and it can be applied to a wide range of encounters and tactics. It's geared mostly for a battlefield scenario. For instance, with this, you're not taking the time to take control of the fight. You need to establish your advantage early so that you can strike, so that you can move on, so that you can be ready for the next guy that's coming at you. And that is our basic premiere on the fundamental formula of Shii Cho.